So we're going to start with chapter 6 now, and there'll be 4 videos. We'll start talking about population growth in general, and then we'll flip to humans and look at how populations grow and some of the factors that are involved. And then we'll even talk a little bit about urban trends. So starting out, I wanted to put in a slide, critical thinking. There's really 4 steps in scientific critical thinking. And so we're talking about a lot of concepts that have been maybe a little controversial with nuclear war, and then we talked about climate change, and now we're talking about population growth. And so, again, I want to make sure that you are critical and you are thinking about all of the things that we're talking about, and don't take my word for it. Look it up, be informed. All right, so the planet Earth population now is sitting around 7.4 billion people. And if you look at the graph on the bottom right, it took 200,000 years to reach 2 billion by about 1974. It took 25 more years to add a third 2 billion. I'm sorry, I missed 150 years to get to the 1974. So 25 years more to add to the 2 billion, and then now we are at 7.4 in 2016. And so you can see this graph here that we're looking at, and you can see this kind of big, huge jump. And we're going to talk about kind of all these concepts, but what has attributed to this major jump in human population are 3 things: early and modern agriculture. So the access to food, additional technologies, just getting better at what we do. It could be, better tools, better computers, all of those things. And then actually one of the big ones is dropping the death rate. People are living longer. And so that is definitely increasing the human population. So we're going to get into that and talk about people and that a little bit later. But populations can grow in really 2 ways. One is what we were seeing on the graph before, and that's called exponential growth. And here you can see the actual equation for exponential growth, and I would like you to actually know that. Delta n over delta t, that is a change in number over the change in time. So R max n, n is the number of individuals, and then R max is kind of the one that's probably a little tricky on this, and that means intrinsic growth rate. Or biotic potential is another way people will say it, biotic potential. What that really means is how many kids can you have and how quick can you have them. So humans have a fairly slow intrinsic growth rate compared to some animals. Elephants are slow. Large mammals tend to be slower. Whereas you get things like rabbits and rodents have a higher intrinsic growth rate. They can have more kids several times a year very quickly. And so depending on that number will determine this growth. And this is actually called a J-shaped curve, exponential growth, J-shaped curve. And so this can happen, this exponential growth. And what it means is that it's not really tied to maybe any real resource. It's just an explosion of individuals. This happens it can happen in rats, can happen in insects, can happen in plants. And so there are things that will grow exponentially. Bacteria is probably one of the best examples. All right, the next one is called logistic growth curve. And you can see that the equation has changed. And really, and it's actually screwed up on here. That should be k minus n over k. That k should be a little farther over. But reality is what that means is what we've added here is the k value. And that's the key here. And that is the carrying capacity. And so what here you see is exponential growth where it just kind of goes up. Here what we have is a carrying capacity. This is how much the population will actually hold. And so you can see here they picked a size of 1,500 as a carrying capacity. So it shoots up really quickly when it's low, but as it gets closer, there are some limiting factors, something in the environment, water, food, whatever it is, air, whatever it is controlling the population. Now, this is obviously a model because what will happen is actually usually will shoot up and over and then fall back down, kind of vary up and over this equation. All right, so that is Vogel's principles. Page 62, number 13 is the S-shaped growth curve. So what we would like you to kind of understand is that there is a carrying capacity. There is a curve that happens that should limit populations. Again, there are factors that I mentioned, like food, water, some resource, some limiting resource that limits a species. All right, moving on. Life histories. These are basically strategies for survival. There's R-selected and K-selected species, and this is really not mentioned well in the textbook, but this comes from the equations, which is why I showed them to you. Again, that R max was that biotic potential or intrinsic growth rate. And so the idea behind this is, okay, I'm an organism, I'm an animal or a plant or whatever it is, and I have a certain amount of energy. So some of that energy keeps me alive. The rest of that energy then should be in the pursuit of getting my genes in the next generation. And that's where this comes in. So here's my thought process. I've got one or two ways to go after this. Now, I want to make sure you understand these are kind of extremes and you can pick in between, but we're going to just deal with the extremes of this. And so R-selected, the idea is, okay, all my energy is going to be putting in to having lots and lots of offspring. That's thousands of kids. But I'm not going to take care of any of them. I'm just going to walk away. They're small in size because I don't want to invest that much in them, and they don't live that long typically. We have a short lifespan. So that's one method. We see that in insects. We see it in frogs. Anything that lays a lot of eggs and walks away. Even sea turtles, although they're a big animal, they do the same thing. Okay, K-selected, on the other hand, is a different choice. And K-selected means that you're only going to have a few young, but you're going to put the energy into keeping them alive. They're typically larger in size. You have a bigger investment in them, and they typically have a longer lifespan. And so that would be any large terrestrial mammal. Elephants, lions, tigers, and bears, oh my. Anything gorillas. So here's our big thing. Here's the thing I want you to think about. So both of these strategies work, but they have differences. And so in the study guide, I ask you, what is better to be R-selected or K-selected in an unstable environment? And I'll tell you, the best is R-selected. The idea behind this is I'm having thousands of eggs laid out there, lots of kids, lots of genetic diversity. And if the environment's changing when they hatch, they're all a bit different. And so they're coming out to a new and different environment. Hopefully one of them or a few of them are prepared for that new environment. So that's kind of the concept. So they do pretty well in an unstable environment that's always changing. K-selected, on the other hand, is better for a stable environment. The problem is if you only have one kid or two kids and you're putting a lot of care into them and they have a long life, the chances are if the environment is changing drastically, they don't do well. Their genes are adapted for the environment when you first conceive them. If it takes them 7 years to get ready to breed, like a California condor, to come of age, that's 7 years. Lots of things can happen. You've had 3 phones since then. So they tend not to do well in unstable environments. And if you looked at most of them, we'll talk about later, but our endangered species, many of them, most of them are K-selected species. The problem is with extinction today, we'll talk about is the rate it's going. All right, so then the question is, which type of growth do humans follow? And what is ZPG? Okay, so the type of human growth is, if you go back to that first graph, we'll flip all the way back. What does that look like? And that would be a J-shaped curve. Now you do see them level off. Okay, so here's what I want you to know. This is what you want to know for the test. Humans right now are growing exponentially, but we are a K-selected species, and we should be growing logistically. So the question is, what is the carrying capacity on the planet? And that's a good question. We don't really know. So anybody tells you, even if on the test I ask you, what is the carrying capacity for humans on the planet? We don't really know. Some people think that we've already gone over it. Some people think that we're under it. Some people think that we're close to it. And we don't really have an answer. We will, unfortunately, probably have an answer if we don't curb human population. So the question is, what is ZPG? And I'm not going to tell you here. I'm going to actually, hopefully, you go to the Zoom, or you've already done the Zoom by the time you see this, and you know what ZPG stands for. We're going to talk about it in class.